Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Late Night Table Talk. My name is Eric Yurgo. I'm going to be your host. I apologize for the lighting situation. We're still figuring it out. It's a new place. We'll talk about that in a second. But it is currently almost midnight in Tokyo, so we should probably get started. Joining me tonight is Omari Akil of Board Game Brothas and a variety of other things: Tabletop Backer Party, Indie Game Developer Network, just tons of stuff. But I'll list off more of the stuff that he's doing in a second. Before we get to him, I mostly just wanted to say again, thanks for watching. We're still in the first season of this, and I'm not super convinced how long this is going to go yet, but I'm enjoying making it. Hope you're enjoying watching it, and just want to, again, thanks for watching. So, normally I talk a little bit more about some topic, but I really don't have a lot to say this episode, just because as you may remember from the previous episode where I was talking with Travis, I moved a few weeks ago, and so we're still kind of in boxes, unpacking, getting everything set up, and it's actually impacted my ability to review games just because there hasn't been a lot of downtime to actually play anything, which is fine. That's kind of what you expect with the moving process, but it's a process. So hopefully by next month I'll have more exciting things to talk about, but in the meantime I can at least say that getting the shelves together was a lot of fun. This is mostly games that I'm still in process on for reviewing, so excited to check them out when I get the chance to do so. And would love to hear in the comments what y'all are playing this month, and if you played anything good. But yeah, I'll have more to say in terms of a full monologue-y sort of conversation next month when I've actually had a chance to sit down and play some stuff. Plus, by then, hopefully we'll have made some progress on some other things that I'll be able to talk more about. So look forward to that. So let's bring on our guest tonight, Omari Akil. Omari is, in short, a powerhouse. He's the lead tabletop game designer for Board Game Brothas, where he's designed both Rap Gods and Hoop Gods, the latter of which just had a very successful Kickstarter. He's also designed Oh My Gourds, if you're more into squash pumpkins and the like. On the subject of game design, he does a fair bit for Tabletop Backer Party as well, going deep into game design and design challenges. If that's not enough for you, he's also the president of the Indie Game Developer Network. Omari is a brilliant writer, thoughtful person, an all-around great dude, and honestly, I feel like I should just let him speak for himself. So please welcome Omari to Late Night Table Talk. All right. Hey, Omari, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be here. This is pretty great, actually.
Yeah, I always get a little bit confused because I have this real nasty tendency. I do this at work as well because I'm like, oh, everyone's accomplishments are important. That I say us and we a lot of times when I mean me and I. But thanks for joining me on Late Night Table Talk. I've existed in this space. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So what's up? What's new?
Oh my goodness. Everything feels new. It feels like every day I'm going in a different direction. So it's a little bit wild.
I mean, every day is roughly 20 years long these days. So there's definitely a certain point where I'm like, I haven't talked to this person in a week because it's been at least 2 hours. And I'm like, my sense of time is annihilated. It just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, but I'm staying busy, which is, a distraction from things that are hard and difficult, just in the world. So that's kind of nice.
Yep.
Lots of game projects, lots of content creation stuff. It's kind of all over the place, but feeling mostly good, and it's working, which I was very unsure of for a long time. I was like, I don't know if all this stuff is going to work together.
That's fair. So would you say you were too blessed to be stressed or too stressed to be blessed?
Yikes. I would say I spend about 2 weeks in each, and I alternate back and forth.
So we're really all shooting for too blessed to be blessed, but most often we're too stressed to be stressed.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like it goes in cycles, and I bounce back and forth between the two, and that kind of makes it okay, right?
That's the lie I keep telling my therapist, and then she frowns her writing in her notebook, and I'm like, hey, when you're sitting in therapy and you're talking to your therapist, and they write something in their notebook, and it makes you feel like whatever you said was the wrong answer to the questions they just asked. You're
I
like,
know that feel.
it's like, well, wait, I meant something else that wouldn't have caused you to write in your notebook. And they look at you and they
Yeah.
write in their notebook more, and you're like, no, this is worse.
Yeah, it's like 10 times worse in couples counseling because there's another person there, and it was like, oh
Oh
no,
gosh.
somebody else knows I said the wrong thing. They
You
watched it
like
happen.
you like look over at your partner and they hold up a little like whiteboard with just like 6.7 written on it. You're like, no, that was the
No.
wrong answer. Yeah, I definitely understand how couples counseling works. I'm like 40% sure that's how it goes down.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
signs with the ratings on. That's how it works.
yeah.
Exactly.
I assume pretty much everything can be solved or improved with a panel of judges who hold up numerical signs with your score after you do it.
Yeah, it's not
Pro-
judgy at all. It's great.
Yeah, probably. That's probably fine, honestly, for mental health reasons. Probably great.
Oh man.
Uh, well, on that terrifying note, any any cool game design stuff you can talk about? I don't want to hit you up for any secret projects, but if there are any like less secret
No.
projects.
Yeah, I mean, I don't keep a lot of game design secrets. I mean, everybody already knows we're working on Hoop Gods. The only thing that's kind of secret about it is like it's hard. We're trying to just like that last piece
Hmm.
is sometimes just a real headache. It's the point where you have to be like, okay, this is actually done, and trying to do that sometimes is brutal.
Hmm.
And yeah, the fact that we're trying to figure out the solo mode, and still kind of meet our target dates for production and manufacturing is a big challenge. It's a big challenge. I'm glad we took it on. Like I'm glad I'm going through that exercise and trying to figure out how to design a solo mode because
Hmm.
it's new for me. But I'm also terribly uncomfortable, like even like talking about it a lot right now
Hmm.
because it's hard and it's uncomfortable and makes me feel more vulnerable than any other kind of game design I've done before. So there's that. But I'm also working on an awesome game called Critical Care, which is
Oh yeah.
a co-op. Yeah, it's a co-op ICU game. So you're doctors in the ICU, and the goal is to discharge your patients. That's been incredible, just from the perspective of like working with an actual ICU doctor who knows this stuff backwards and forwards, and
Hmm.
I get to just focus on the game design parts. And
Yeah, that's
like,
cool.
I'm like, does this fit into the theme? How thematic is this? Does this work? Is this how doctor stuff operates? Can I do this and not this? And like, also, he has great suggestions. He has a little bit of a like game design brain too. So
Hmm.
that's super nice too. And then yeah, everything else I'm doing is still very much up in the air. I have a few other weird game design projects that have been kind of off and on for the last couple years, trying to wrap my head around those things. And then I have the Zenobia Award design that I'm working on, which I'm talking about it a little bit now. So I've been
Hmm.
like letting people know a little bit about it. And it's a historical, cultural game. I decided to choose the Tuskegee Airmen
An excellent
as
choice.
my focus, yeah, for that game. And I'm really, really happy with the direction it's going in now. I have my proposal, and I'm going to be submitting that this week. So I'm like, this is it's more promising than I thought. My initial design idea for it was a little bit wishy-washy, but where I'm at now feels super interesting. And I'm like, okay, we can go with this.
That's actually one thing that I really appreciate about. So like in the conversations I have with a few folks, people when they find out that you review board games, they're always like, "Well, have you thought about designing your own board game?" And I'm
Oh,
like, okay, so I want to be clear here. I have done just enough design work to be like, ooh, this is hard in ways that I don't enjoy. And so I'm very much it
yeah,
gives me
yeah,
a
yeah.
really great appreciation when I'm talking to like folks who do more game designy stuff because I'm just like you're mentioning like the solo mode is hard and it's challenging, it makes you feel vulnerable, and I'm like, oh, I find all of that way too difficult. Like I get stressed if there's too much complexity in an area that I don't understand. So like sometimes I think about how like
Mm.
computers are mostly made out of like silicon and silicon's just sand, and then I get extremely stressed about it. Like at a
No,
very
that's
like
fair.
deep existential level. And that's kind of how I feel about
Yeah.
like if I'm building out a game design, I'm like, okay, does this need to be like a 3 or a 7? But if it's 7, doesn't that mean this other thing needs to be like another number? And then I just have all these X's and Y's, and I'm like that lady in the GIF who's like looking at all those numbers flying by. I'm just like, it's too much. It stresses me out.
And it's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, like in those moments, I trust my instincts more than anything. I'm like, all right, let's just do this and see what happens and just go with it. I'm reliant on spreadsheets and I do the math where it matters, but sometimes there's so much complexity. I just have to just go with what feels right and just leave it at that. And
That's why I
that's
always
a
wonder
that's a
about
leap.
like games like Millennium Blades, where like Millennium Blades is just like a snarl of complexity, like all these
Mm,
different sets, they all interact with each other. I always wonder how that gets designed and how like after a certain point is it kind of like Betrayal at House on the Hill, where you're like there is no way for us to resolve all of these like potential random outcomes, so we are just going to
yeah.
say it's where it's at.
Yeah, I think sometimes I feel that way when I think about designing very complex games. I mean, personally, that stresses me out too. So I haven't gone into like a super complex game design mode yet. Um, but I imagine that at some level, it's like, can you really balance it all the way completely?
I have to assume you just gotta like channel your inner like Stefan Feld and be like points, points, maybe a few tiles, but also points. Points here for this, points there for that, some points
Yeah.
over in the back for my friend. Also some points if you go first. Why not? And I'm just like, I don't. That just seems more stressful. You're just adding points to places.
Just adding points everywhere.
Yeah, I'm like, I guess there has to be some magic on the back end to make it all work. But yeah, nah,
There's points everywhere, points to go
yeah,
around. It's gonna balance itself, right?
I don't know.
I don't know that. If the complexity gets to that point, I feel like I would be in kind of a tough situation. But I don't know. I haven't been there yet. We'll see.
Looking forward to when you do. Like, let me know once you
It's gonna
blaze the trail
happen.
into Complexity Town. Like, come back to me over here and be like, oh, I don't. I mean, really, the fundamental problem is like game design is a lot about playing the same game many times, and on the
Mm,
reviewer side, I want to play many games enough times to feel like I have a good sense of them. So like, they're fundamentally like kind of opposed
oh
tasks,
yeah.
right?
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, me over in reviewer town, I'd love to be like, was the complexity hard? Like, did you see the world? Like,
I'm more comfortable and I'm sort of messing around in the party game territory now. That feels doable with everything else I have going on. Because yeah, it's more about it kind of getting into psychology
mhm,
of the game
right,
more so than the systems and the balance, which I really appreciate that.
right. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people who are out here being like, I think that the card game Watch Your Mouth is not terribly balanced. You're like someone's over here being like, I think that Pie Face has some serious mechanical issues. And you're like,
Yeah, it has
maybe.
a clear runaway leader problem.
Yeah,
Clear.
who cares? Like, at a certain deep fundamental level, you're like, wait a minute, isn't Candyland already over by the time the deck has been shuffled? And they're like, shh, shh,
Nobody.
shh, shh, shh. Don't
It's
worry
fine.
about it.
It's
Everything's
okay.
fine. Like, nothing hurts.
Yeah,
Ugh. Yeah. I don't. I mean, hot maybe. Like,
maybe.
it always comes back to I don't know enough about game design to be more than like, huh. I never really thought about it like that. Like when I think about games and like their design, I think a lot about how like the mechanics feel together, or like what experience
Hmm.
did this play create for me, or like what was a fun
Yeah.
story that happened during the game. And so like at that point, I end up having a better experience because of my players, not because like the game itself really like I mean, I can freely admit, right? I've gotten rules wrong for games before. There's an
Oh
ongoing
yeah.
joke in a couple of my games that I'm like, oh, I've got a fun variant called the What's Eric Playing? I didn't read the rules that closely, and by the time that I realized I was playing it wrong, I'd already played it 10 times. And now looking back as I write this review, I probably should have gotten the rules right, and I've since played the game with the correct rules, but these are the rules I did play with in case you want to try it. Variant.
Yes.
It makes habitats pretty fun, but much harder. Um, I always tell people that the rules are just one way that someone said you can have fun with these pieces. So,
That's really fair. I'm not like, even when we're like writing rules, there's often times where I kind of leave things a little ambiguous because I'm like, you know what? You can probably have fun if you take this in either direction. So I'm not pressed on that specific thing,
mhm.
especially if the language can just be simpler for people to just take in. I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, that's fine. You're gonna have fun one way or another.
And also, like, half the time, what'll happen is, like, if it's something that's, like, really, really important and, like, difficult to figure out, the ambiguity may trip me up. But, like, a lot of times I just skim the rules because I'm like, I need to teach people this game as quickly as possible. And I'm not the rules guy, but I'm
Yeah.
still reading them because I have become the rules guy. And then we play the game, and, like, the real issue is, right, like, after my first play, I have a good enough sense of the rules that I don't look at the rules again. And
Oh, right.
that means if I got the rules wrong the first time, I've now internalized that error.
Uh-huh.
And so this
It's
has led to
forever
a
now.
it's led to a fun habit where, like, when I'm reviewing a game, I'll have the rule book next to me so I can, like, write up my, like, setup of my gameplay. I look and I'm like, the catcher penguin starts where? Oh. Well, I
What?
suppose now that you point that out, that would make the game a lot easier. Oh.
But you've also been doing it long enough where you can probably read that and you know how it would have changed the game, and
Ah.
kind of you can continue to write that review and it's still going to be good and fair,
Mhm.
which is pretty, then like that's a skill on its own.
That's the dream. I'll still usually go back and at least play it one more time with the correct rules, and then I'll note the difference in my review. Because, like, I think I play a variant version of Valley of the Vikings, for instance, where, like,
Okay.
instead of you reset the pins at the start of your turn. So I don't know if you play Valley of the Vikings.
No, I haven't.
It's a very thematically consistent and culturally well researched Viking bowling game
Oh,
from Hava.
I
Um,
adorable. Love
Yeah,
it.
so you basically have this, like, big bat and you hit a ball into a bunch of pins, and then this is actually the cool part. You move down a dock, and if someone's in front of you and you're supposed to move, you just skip over them. But if
Oh.
you move too far, you fall off the edge of the dock, and then the scoring phase happens for everyone else. And so every time
That's
someone
fun.
gets dunked, everyone else scores,
Oh,
which
that
is
that's
really
really
interesting.
good.
Because you now
Yeah.
need to figure out when you need to hit the pins, and where the pins are matters because the pins determine who moves. So
Yeah.
our rule was that, or the rule in the rule book is, at the start of your turn, if pins are knocked over, you reset them in the order of your choice. So that way you can choose where you want stuff. Our
Makes
rule
sense.
was, at the end of your turn, you reset the pins that you knocked over. So now, if I finish my turn and it's not your turn yet, I can set the pins up in a very specific configuration that forces you to either hit really creatively or risk knocking a pin over that gives me what I want.
Ooh, that's really fascinating too. Yeah,
Yeah,
I totally get both ways. Like they're just interesting in different ways.
yeah. It's very much like, oh, it's just a who does what when, but it's an interesting who does what when.
Right. And the fact that both of them are effective is pretty great. But
Valley of
like
the
that's,
Vikings is
yeah.
wildly good. Like, I know Haba makes great stuff for, like, the family weight stuff anyways, but, like,
Yeah.
that specific game is just extremely fun.
I mean, it sounds like it.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it if you
Definitely.
haven't played it. But speaking of games and names of games, I suppose it's a terrible segue, but whatever. It's a nice show. So God, I love doing that. Just like you recognize something wasn't good, and you're like, nope, we're leaving it in. Uh, So our next segment is my personal favorite segment. I don't know why. I like them all, but like maybe this one's like a little bit whatever. I'm calling it Game the Name. So I'm gonna come up with the name of some game that doesn't exist yet, but should. And then with our combined powers, we are going to iterate on some set of pitch to bring it out of the ether into the shared collective reality that we occupy. Sound good?
Yeah, I think I'm ready.
Excellent. I'm not, because I have no thoughts of empty about this. And so what I am probably going to do is just kind of oh no, I got it. I was like, I'm gonna come up with some phrasing until I find something. It's gonna be me looking around, and I know what it's gonna be. The name of the game that we are trying to design is called All the Lights.
All the lights.
All the lights. I looked over, saw a light to my right, and I was like, all these lights are extremely bright. And I was like, ah, got it. All the lights.
All the lights.
This is how I do so much of my process. Just me coming up with things that are relatively nearby.
Ooh. I mean, I'm already. I have a idea that I sort of am in love with already.
Okay, pitch it. Talk me through it. I'll add some things. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of mechanics yet, but thematically, I want you to be the operators of like the lights for like a concert stage, where you have performers on stage that you're either trying to like follow or like chase down with lights, or match like some sort of choreography, because that's actually really hard. There's like lighting choreography. So I feel like that might be fun.
Okay. Are we co-op or are we competitive?
Ooh. Co-op seems too easy.
Okay. So that's the pitch then. You're competing light people at a music festival, right?
Okay.
And so all the shows are playing simultaneously. So that's fine. You want your lights to be good enough that you can attract people to come see your show, because they can see all the lights from where they are.
Yes.
Right? And so your points are your crowd level.
This is brilliance. I love it.
I'm only here to catch, right? So I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Yes, and we add in crowd level as essentially a victory point sort of mechanic. And so when the game ends after the like song or the show is over, whoever has the current highest crowd did the best with the lighting, right?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think you can even potentially, so everybody basically is operating their own stage.
Right.
Which is super cool. So we're like at a music festival. I've been to one like that. It was literally two stages on opposite ends of like a football field.
Right.
Both playing at the same time. It was super awkward, but I get it.
Yeah, I've been at outside lands where it's like all of Golden Gate Park is just like different music stages, and you can be like, oh, I would like to go to see Paul McCartney or Phoenix, or they had a section which was competitive erotic fan fiction, which I'm actually really bummed I missed out on, because I have no idea what that is, but I would like to know. They had a whole comedy area for it.
Yeah.
I was like, how was it competitive? How did they score? These are questions I don't have the answer to.
Yeah, I think what would be fun, I'm weirdly considering like worker placement.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like
that scans in my brain. That sounds right.
Yeah. I feel like in that kind of environment, and I know this is the case for photographers in that environment because I know a photographer that worked at one of these festivals. Like, it's actually really hard to it's not that many people doing all this work. So figuring out how to get people, and I think we'll have to extend it out a little bit. Like, you probably want like a sound person that you manage a little bit, or like a sound booth that you have to manage. And I mean, potentially everybody's just understaffed. So you're like moving people around to try to make sure they hit all the different points at some time.
Oh yeah, I like what you're saying, because it's not quite real time, but it's almost like you need to manage where your people are, because the music has a certain, like, for certain songs, right? You're like, okay, this song we need to have a like light person on this spot at this time to put a spotlight, but there's oh yeah, okay, so I got it. Everyone, like your crew got food poisoning, right? Because they all
Yes.
went out to eat. So it's just you. You have to operate the entire stage by yourself.
Oh,
And
that's
so
even better.
you're like one person. You're trying to run around. You're trying to basically the worker that you're placing is the one person that you have to try and like be in the right spot at the right time. You have like some things that you've like jury rigged up, right? Like you can like tie
Yeah.
down a light and be like, yes, this light is just staying here until I move back and untie it. Or like
Yeah.
this sound is staying at this level because I can turn the crank and just leave it. And so you want to make sure that like it's okay if the sound is a little bit too loud, but if it drops below a certain point, that's not good. Or like if the light is still a
Mm,
spotlight when like the singer's about to like address the crowd, so the spotlight's right in their face and they fall off the stage, that's not good.
yeah. No, that's definitely bad. Can we add pyrotechnics? I feel like if we were going to put on a show,
Why not?
there should be some pyrotechnics.
Right. We
And
like we are lighting Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, and at least three casualties will happen over the course of this board game.
it could definitely happen. I like the idea of the pyrotechnics being like connected to very specific moments. What if there was like a card track and you could only see like 3 to 5 cards at a time
Mhm.
and they're just moving towards like a cue basically and you're trying to match all the cues as they hit, but you're
Ooh.
limited and some things take like multiple actions to
Right.
actually get them ready.
And
So
it
you're
takes
like,
multiple actions to walk there, right? So like you're on this stage and like
poof.
if you're over here, it might take you two cards to walk back over here. So the question is, oh, should I turn up the sound because I could walk over to it and I could hit it perfectly? Or should I move over and move the light so that it's ready for the five cards from now when I need to spend like two
Uh-huh.
actions moving this big light? I like
Exactly.
this. This is interesting because the cards are essentially a time track, and so your songs
Yeah.
are everyone's got different songs, and the songs themselves may have like some shuffling for like the actual like pitching of it, and like what needs to happen when.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the pyrotechnics are like big moments that you like absolutely have to be in the space on at that moment. Like that's the one where like you have to be there at that time
right.
to cue it. But everything else you can kind of like set and leave and so there's this balance of like things you have to do exactly at the moment from the right spot and then there's things that you can like leave and be okay.
Yeah,
I
I think
like it.
that's actually pretty fun. Yeah, that would be fun. I like the premise being that like you and your opponents all like are friends who like work this festival together, and you went out to go get food before the show, but all your like fellow crewmates went to a different restaurant, and they all got food poisoning, and so now it's just
Yeah,
the four of you, and you're like,
it's just you.
I guess we're gonna do the best that we can with it. We might as well make it fun, right? So like,
Right?
yeah,
You
that's
could even make some calls or like you could bring in like phone a friend. You have like emergency people who come in, but they're like
right,
very low quality.
right,
So like you can correctly do some things,
right.
but they're never gonna give you the actual like perfect points that you need. They're gonna
Right.
all
And
be
it
subpar.
takes them time to come in. So if you call one of your friends like, "Hey, when can you be here?" They're like, "5 minutes probably." And they're like, this song's only 10 minutes." And they're like, "Okay, fine. Like please just get here." And so
just get
like
here and help.
yeah, they're like, "Okay, can you just hold that spotlight in place?" And they're like, "Sure." And they just
There it
never.
is.
Yeah, I think there'd have to be some tweaking about it, like some tweaking of like different things to like get it. I think this is good though. This is
I
this is a
mean, it's
fun.
fascinating. Thematically, it just like operating these things. It always fascinates me. Like I literally have gone to shows where I like space out and stop watching the show and I'm just watching the sound booth because the guy's doing a bunch of stuff and it's super interesting to me. I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, but it looks cool.
I like the idea that we could make the game without actually knowing what they were doing, though. So it's like
Oh
increase
yeah.
the dials, and you're like, it just shows someone like pushing them up, and you're like, we don't know what this does, but it's probably bad, and we shouldn't do that, but we could, and
That
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 in and of
feels
itself is
fair.
fun.
Oh, Oh my god. All the
But
lights.
yeah, all the
With an
lights.
exclamation point.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
like Clank. It
Yeah.
100% needs that exclamation point. Every word should have an exclamation
All
point.
the lights.
Like we are panicking.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be fair, that's the excitement of it, is that you're very much like, oh God, nobody is feeling well. Like they're all just very ill. And so you're like, okay,
Yep.
well, I guess if we're all definitely gonna get fired. So we might as well go out like with a bang and see if any of us
Yeah.
can like do well enough to keep our jobs.
Yeah. And that's the win. That's whoever wins just keeps their job.
Yeah.
Everybody else is fired.
Yeah, they don't get a bonus or anything because like capitalism is terrible. But they like their boss is like, oh yeah, decent job last night. You're like,
Yeah. Thanks.
thanks so much. Awesome. Well, yeah, that's all the lights. So if you're a publisher just looking to like crush it with a game that's almost 20% designed,
There it is.
hey, you know where to find
Mic
us,
drop.
I guess. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, yeah, that's good. That seems like a fun one though.
I'm into it.
Yeah, it could be fun. All right, so I got some questions that I want to ask as part of like our chat. So, the first one I want to ask was I do a cursory bit of research before these calls, mostly sometimes to the embarrassment of the person that I'm talking to. Not always. I just sort of I'm like, who is this person? So I was talking to Eric
Yeah.
Buscemi a while back, and I found his like storied swimming career in college. I was like, can we talk a little bit about this? But
Whoa.
yeah,
So good.
I just like internet searching. But so you were doing originally some more like computer sciencey stuff before you went game design full time?
Yeah. I so like the last sort of 6 years before I kind of decided to just do game stuff. I was in higher education tech. I did two roles there, and they were very, very different actually. Actually, I did three. Oh my goodness, I totally forgot the first one. But they're all kind of related. I was technically a business systems analyst
Mhm.
the entire time I was there, but mostly I would work on projects that involved. In the beginning, it was more like security projects, and so yeah, any project that we needed to develop to either assign people security, like automation for that, or a lot of times like big new initiatives that needed security designed.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would do a little bit of that stuff, and eventually went to just working with student records mostly,
Mhm.
and like designing um, a lot of I worked on kind of like a task force. It was
Mhm.
a 4-person team, and we took on projects that basically were too either would take too much time for like a office to do on their own with their tech people,
Mhm.
or it was a project that involved multiple offices having to work together, and
Mhm.
like nobody wanted to give up their tech people to do those
Right.
jobs, so we would do those.
Interesting. Interesting. That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have like fond memories of like the little security stuff that I did in college. They put up this like sad little website and they'd be like, yeah, this is like a movie website where you can look up fun movies. You're gonna SQL inject this website and steal all the credit card information from it. I'm like, oh,
Oh.
it looked like the kind of website that like like a like young scrappy developer would make, and they're like, you're gonna break
Uh-huh.
it until there's nothing left, so you understand why SQL injection is bad. And I'm like, oh,
Oh.
I don't want to do that. They're like,
Yeah.
your assignment is complete when you have all the credit cards, and I'm like, oh,
Oh,
uh,
it is sad. I wasn't working with network security, which that was actually very pleasant.
mhm.
Because that stuff scares the crap out of me.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
seriously.
Yeah, we had an assignment we had an assignment where basically they would give us when we were learning like assembly, they gave us a really fun assignment which was just a prompt, and it would say, you are on level 1, enter the correct password. And so you're like,
Yeah.
what happens if I enter the wrong password? And if you enter the wrong password, it sends an email to the TAs saying, Eric entered the wrong password. Please take 1/4 of a point off of his assignment grade.
That's
And you
so
were,
pleasant.
yep, and you were done when you won. And so what you had to do is like you had to just disassemble the program and be like, okay, so it's incrementing these registers to move forward, which makes me think that it's looking for a number that if you subtract 5 from it, gives you 17. So is the password just the number 22? And you type in 2, 2, and you like close your eyes, you hit enter, and it's like, congratulations, you're now level 2. And you're like, huh.
Oh, all right.
That was a hoot.
It's kind of stressful.
Yeah, I don't do as much like of the actual like programming stuff anymore as I used to, but
Yeah.
I miss it in the nostalgic sense of like you miss college, but you remember college, so you don't actually want to go back to college. You just want to like miss it from a distance.
No, I did more actual programming when I first graduated, and I have fond memories of thinking about that stuff, but every time I even attempt to sort of think about it again, I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Like even tabletop simulator scripting, I get a little bit excited about it, and then I'm like, but do I really want to do that?
No. My favorite thing about Tabletop Simulator is just that you can scale pieces. And so, like, if someone's not looking, I'll just right-click on one of the tokens in front of them and just start scaling it upwards. And so they'll look over and, like, one of their cards is bigger than all the other ones. So I'm like,
The funnest part about that is you can't stack them on each other if they're different sizes. It's great.
that'll teach them. Yeah, people haven't wanted to play Tabletop Simulator with me in a while. I don't know why. Anyways. So, there are, especially in these trying and uncertain times, there are a lot of people who are thinking about different career options or different career changes, and a number of people who are considering. I've talked to a few people who are considering entering the like game industry full time from a variety of different sectors, either the design side, the content side, or otherwise. Since you've entered the game industry full time, do you have any thoughts or advice for these folks?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on it. And I think largely is just understanding that it's incredibly difficult to focus on one aspect of tabletop industry. So if you're just doing design, it's pretty hard to do just one aspect full time. Most people that I know who are full time in the industry have to do like 5 different things. So like set your expectation that just doing one is going to be more challenging than doing more. But also like for me, I made that choice because I just liked that my world would revolve around games. For me, it was less about just like wanting to be in games full time and more about it was really difficult to switch back and forth between games and not games.
Right.
And I just wanted, and I don't know that I'll do it full time forever, but I wanted at least a chunk of time where I could have that experience and not have to go back and forth. But now I just go back and forth between different gaming projects and areas, and it's the same and it's difficult, but it's all games, so it just makes me much happier.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I actually ended up moving to more of like a writing position for my job because I had been doing so much writing outside of my job that I was like, oh, I guess the writing. And so now it's me hopping from writing this to writing that, and they're different, but the similarities are interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So that change felt good for me. So yeah, I don't know. It's a cool industry, but it's very challenging. And the opportunities are scattered all over the place. I think that is feels like one of the hardest pieces about it is that it it's just all over the place trying to figure out how to do the work and find the work and produce whatever it is that you want to produce. It's just it's Wild West kind of because we grew so fast. I feel like the last 10 years has just been crazy for growth in the industry. So I don't know how to, yeah, managing that is just it's a lot. It's just a lot of work. Just be ready for a lot of work.
Yeah, and I worry about imposter syndrome a fair bit just because the industry like is full of great people doing great work. It's also got a lot of people who are doing great work that does go relatively unnoticed because a lot of it is exactly like you were saying, right? It's a lot of like different things all needing to happen in just the right way for like these like
Mm.
gears to interlock to you for you to like move forward into what you want to be doing.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges I think to sort of create a path or like design a path forward.
Hmm.
It's a little bit trickier to do that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. All right. Well, this next question is mostly for me because I am extremely tired and I have overcommitted to too many things. But where do you find? So I sang your praises earlier on the show. It's a part that you haven't heard yet, so you will also have to watch the show to hear it.
Cool.
Sorry. But where do you find the time to do all the things that you are doing and to do it all so well?
Um, the answer to that question is that like honestly, I don't ever feel like I'm doing it all well. It's always something that's kind of dropping off.
Mhm.
I think I managed to recover from that fairly well. Because, you know, I'm lucky in that like a lot of the work that I do is kind of self-managed and self-timed. So like I can let some of my company's things like slow down, or I can intentionally slow things down if I need to catch up in another area
Mhm.
or spend more time and focus in another area. So that gives me like a little bit of flexibility. And that tends to happen in like the most stressful periods. I'm
Right.
like, oh my goodness, I know I should be marketing and making ads and running, but like I'm like, you know what? I have this other event coming up or this big playtest for this other game that I'm collaborating with somebody with, and that feels slightly more important. So for better or for worse, like yeah, often I let my own things slip, but I also can turn around and be like, hey, talking to my brother who runs the company. All right, it's crunch time. We got to get all this stuff done in a week that we planned on doing in 2 weeks. Can we do it? Maybe not, but we can sure try.
I relate to that unfortunately a little bit too well lately, but oh man,
Yeah,
that
but
is
I do some things pretty well most of the time, and that feels good. And also I'm kind to myself. I'm like I can't be perfect. I can't be I'm pretty good at a lot of things. And I'm just comfortable. I'm very comfortable there. I don't need to be great at that many things.
that's fair. I mean, that is I think especially these days that's like the least that we can do is be kind to ourselves, and we just kind of
Oh,
have
yeah.
to be.
I mean, my
Yeah.
production is at like 70%, and I might be being generous compared to like 2 years ago.
Oh yeah. No, like end of 2019, I was dropping like 5 reviews a week, and I was like, this is a tough pacing, but I can do this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm never gonna die. And now I'm like at 2 weeks, and I'm like several weeks behind, and I'm like, well, well, he's
Yeah.
goofed me. Past me strikes again.
Yeah, it's always past me. I'm like, what are you gonna do? This was me also.
Yeah, just it's me shaking my fist at like the masked man upstairs, and me like, how could you do this to me, masked man? He's like, oh, why
Oh.
don't you tell that to yourself? And I'm like, no.
Uh,
Me, the one person I trusted?
right? I kind of want a mask now so I can like actually do that performance for myself when I just need it. I just need to it's you. It's
You
you.
got one of those
Don't
cool masks that like fits over your face, like Like, you know how in like superhero stuff they've got those masks that are definitely like made of plastic or something because they're like very like tight and like
Oh yeah.
hard, but they like can pull them off like they're like I don't. I'm just like, what is that made out of? I don't know.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
It scares me too. Those masks scare me a little bit.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so you seem to take on many roles, but two of the roles that I see most often are on the more like content creation side and on the like game design side. How do you find that those two roles intersect, and are there places where one really informs the other? I know a lot of your content work is around game design, but just thinking in that
Yeah.
space as well.
Yeah, I think the cool place that they actually intersect and like build on each other in a nice way is is basically that like I have to approach game design in a way that feels good to me, right? Like
Hmm.
I have to try and like pick and choose, like how am I going to go about this process?
Right.
And I try to find, you know, what are the things that excite me about game design and what makes me feel good. And in that space, it often is the tapping into what makes people feel good.
Right.
Like it's almost always the thing that drives me forward when I'm thinking about design.
Hmm.
And basically when I'm doing content creation, I'm in that same headspace. I'm like, how can I produce this or do this in a way that's going to make people feel good? Like I'm trying like crafting an experience.
Hmm.
So in both scenarios, that's what I'm paying attention to more than anything else. And that like it's nice that that exists on both ends. And I can just dig into getting into people's brains a little bit and like I'm like a not I don't really know anything about psychology, but I think about it a lot, so I
Hmm.
think I do.
Oh, if you ever want to look into some interesting stuff, cognitive psychology is super fun. I studied it a little
Oh,
bit as part of the degree I was doing in college, but cognitive psychology is wild stuff.
I might have to dig a little
It's
bit.
fun. Highly recommend it.
And
It's just like it's things about like how people process stuff. Like, are you familiar with like the door experiment?
no, I don't think
So that
so.
one's a fun one. So it's basically imagine you and I are having a conversation, and then I'm asking you for directions somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're local, so you can tell me where the directions are. It's a fairly complicated route. While we're talking, two people holding like a normal sized door very rudely walk in between us. Extremely
Cool.
rude of them. I switch places with one of the people holding the door, and so I just walk off, and the other person takes my place with like the map asking for directions. You don't
Oh.
notice,
Oh,
and
that's
it
weird.
it doesn't matter if they change the race, the gender, the clothing, whatever. You just don't really notice because it's like your brain doesn't expect things to change, and so if you're not
Mm.
expecting a change, you don't notice it.
That's
Stuff like
super
that.
weird.
It's fascinating. You're just like, oh, well, that's
But
chilling.
I do love things like that.
Oh,
So,
yeah, you should definitely look into cognitive psychology. It's a fun, it is a very fun little genre because like
oof.
our brains really are just like piles of meat that if you put enough electricity into it, it learns calculus. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, I would not trust it for a lot of decisions.
No, it's a strange organ for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, it's wild. So, on top of the content creation role, the designer role, you're also president of the Indie Game Developer Network, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's new for 2021, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing.
Congratulations. I imagine you were like, well, with all this free time. Uh,
Obviously.
but do you have any? There are a lot of indie game developers, yeah. So do you have any advice that you would
Yeah.
give to like up and coming game designers?
I mean, for new game designers, like, and I think as like being in the role that I'm in at IGDA, I'm thinking about it way more now than I used to.
Right.
But really, really, really like find a design community. It is invaluable.
That makes
It
sense.
is like even if it's just three people, but if you can kind of have conversations regularly with each other, like that makes everything so much easier. So I think that's even like a thing that we are, I think in IGDN going to try to help people with more is really digging into the network part of the organization a
Mhm.
little bit more, and just helping people make the connections that are going to help them progress.
Right.
Um,
And even just like having other people to like test each other's designs and like kind of crack at it together seems pretty useful.
Yeah, I have five designers here, and before the pandemic, we were meeting basically every week. And I mean, we wouldn't have a new iteration every week, but between the five of us, every other week, basically, you could retest something
Right.
and give feedback. And the nice part about too is if you have like a tight-knit community like that, you start to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses
Hmm.
in terms of design and feedback, and that is just like a whole nother level of playtesting
Right.
because you can ask different questions and get to different answers just based on the person, and once you know them well enough, it's super nice. So
No, that makes sense.
yeah, people are doing it online a little bit now, so which I am very impressed by. I am horrific at it, but I've seen it be very effective for folks.
Yeah, I've seen some Discords and some like Slacks and some like playtest networks that are yeah, people are really plugging away at like trying to build stuff up in Tabletop Simulator. It's actually helped me a fair bit because a lot of like Kickstarter games and other games are moving to Tabletopia, so I can actually like
Mm,
play them with other people
yeah,
as
that's
opposed
cool.
to I was not living in a scenario in a situation where I could like easily play board games for the last like 6 months or so. So I was mostly playing games either online or by myself, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't great. But now I'm in a situation where I think I can actually like start playing again, which is good.
Oh, so wonderful, Eric.
Yeah, that's the dream. So like speaking of pandemic related like changes, how has the pandemic like affected or impacted your design process? So I imagine that like not being able to meet as regularly with the playtest group has really changed how you
Yeah.
playtest, really.
Yeah, I mean, I, it was very sad actually. Like, we didn't even really touch base with each other for like the first 6 months.
Right.
So it was, it's incredibly hard still for me to do design work now. Um, One, of course, just being less productive, but also not having access to that group specifically because I knew those people and I knew what to expect. It was easy to just go sit in a coffee shop. But also just like getting used to the tools. It was such a huge learning curve that most of us were forced into. And I think in the beginning I was kind of in denial a little bit. I was
Mhm.
like, you know what? Maybe I'll just slow down on design work. There's other stuff that I can do and it'll be fine. And yeah, and that I was like, oh no, this is gonna go on forever. Uh,
Yep.
so I gotta figure this out. And yeah, trying to learn the tools and organize. It feels harder to organize. In reality, that might not be true, but everything just feels harder.
Everybody's got stuff now, right? Like especially now that we're like almost a year into it, people have their own like coping mechanisms, their own strategies, and like sometimes people just aren't available because like for me, I fill up a lot of my weekdays with like calls. So I might be on a call until like
Hmm.
10 p.m. And then
Yeah.
after 10 p.m., people aren't generally like down to hang out. But like I know what my Thursday process is, right? I'm on a bunch of calls. I may have calls in the evening, and then around like 11:45, I'm like, oh, I better get ready for bed so that at midnight I can be in bed booting up Disney Plus, yelling, ah, Disney Plus, why are you down? Let me watch WandaVision. And then I watch WandaVision.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we are all just like in that mode where we're trying to figure out the best way to live and survive. It does. It makes it harder. And also like I find it just hard to schedule things because
Mhm.
I never know how I'm gonna feel. Like
Oh
it
yeah.
fluctuates so hard now. I'm just like,
There's no point in scheduling things more than like 2 weeks out because like if
no,
you get to the 2 weeks, you're just like, oh, sorry, I haven't left my bed in a day and a half.
exactly.
Except to
Like
get food.
this Monday was one of the best days I've had in the entire pandemic. Like I was getting stuff done, I was talking to all the people that I care about, and then is it Thursday or Wednesday now?
Today's
It's Thursday
Thursday.
now.
I
Yeah,
only know
and
because WandaVision is tonight.
that's fair. But already it's Thursday, and this week is trash for me now. Like so many things happened between Monday and today, and I'm just like, oh my goodness.
You look back on past Omari and you're like, ah, you didn't
You
know what you
innocent,
had.
innocent boy.
No, you didn't know what you had. Oh
Mm-mm.
man. That is something interesting though. It's just like thinking about like tooling and like how we. So you know how like industry board games have like trends, right? Like we've.
Yeah,
I think we're probably mostly out of the roll and write trend. Like everyone got a roll and write game out of their system, and now we're kind of like that's like I thought asymmetry was going to be a big trend, and then like I think I thought
didn't
that going like
happen.
well, I think it was like coming up, and then the pandemic happened, and then everyone was like, no, and so it's
That's fair.
reasonable. Like I'm pretty sure that the like 2021 game trend is not going to be real time dexterity games, for instance.
Yeah, definitely not that.
I'd love for it to be, but it's just not looking good. Do you think that there are any trends that are going to happen in the industry post pandemic, especially around like game design? I imagine that people are going to be making more of their stuff in Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator, but beyond that, like mechanically or etc.
I, you know, I don't know if this is considered a trend, but I feel like the family weight game, that's where a lot of our head has been a little bit, I think, because that feels like a good target audience now since families are mostly the people who are playing games together. I think a lot of us are thinking more about that family weight game and that family style game because those also translate very well to when we get back to board gaming. Like that could still hit really good for a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
So I think we'll see a lot of that. Um, Other than that, I don't know if it'll be anything specific, any genre, any mechanic. Like I can't think of anyone. I would love for it to be push your luck, but I don't see that happening. I honestly thought trick taking would happen too. I feel like that was also a pre-pandemic. It was
yeah,
being talked about and thought about a little more,
yeah. Which bums me
and
out
then
because I
kind of
love
disappeared.
trick taking. I have a bunch of Japanese trick taking games that I just can't play because they can be played with three, but like maybe 2 weeks ago was the first time I even had a scenario in which like three people could play a game together. And like now we're
Right?
unpacking boxes and we don't really have time to like sit down and play a bunch of board games.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird because I actually tried to do a little bit heavier because basically my thought process was if I play one game, I get tired.
No,
So it doesn't matter what game it is. So I might
better
as
be
well
long.
play a heavy game so that way I'm playing a long game and I feel like I'm justified being tired. So I tried like
Yeah.
Dominations. I'm gonna try like Carpe Diem soon. Nicole
Oh,
Hoye told me she'd teach me Castles of Burgundy. Like I'm like, yeah, he's doing it.
yeah.
Like,
I'm interested in the new dominant species. The
oh
cover also,
yeah,
it's like gripping. I'm like, I just want it because the cover is cool.
that is what game did I? I bought the Shipwreck Arcana because I was like, oh, that art is cool. I know nothing about the game, and then I loved it. It's one of my all-time favorite games, and I was like, he's done it.
Wow.
We did it, folks. That never works.
Yeah, just buying off the cover art. Yeah, yeah, sometimes, but yeah, it's rare.
It's rare. I mean, it works for like Red Raven for me, right? Like I'm just like, that's fine. me get sleeping gods like, ah, can't wait. But
Can't wait.
I'm trying to think of, are there? I don't know. I think I can convince myself of most things. I'm like, is there a game with really pretty art that I didn't like? And I was like, um, oh man, I think it's a game called They Who Were Eight.
I don't know it.
It's a pretty game. It's very like abstract and it's like relationships like mythology. It just wasn't very fun. And I feel like
Mm,
it should be fun, and it wasn't. And that happens sometimes.
yeah, no, I
But
get
I was
that.
sad.
Yeah, I
Oh,
felt that way honestly about Feast for Odin.
oh yeah?
Yeah, I don't know, like mechanically it's super solid, but I just didn't have fun. It was the strangest situation, and I couldn't even pinpoint exactly why. Like I understood it. I didn't do poorly at it. It was like mathematically I should have enjoyed it, but I don't know. It just didn't hit for me.
That's fair. I had one where it was basically Splendor, but without the engine building part of it. And I'm like, oh,
And
but
what is
that's
it? What
I
kind?
was like, but that's the whole game. Like the whole
I don't.
game. Otherwise you're just getting gems and you have to keep getting expensive gems every time. I'm like, yes. And I'm like,
But what's I yeah. I
it's
I don't know the
totally
answer.
possible someone else loved it. I was just very much like, this is just Splendor without the engine building.
Yeah, that feels less exciting
It was
to me for
very
sure.
dull. I'm thankful that I rarely play games that I would say were truly bad. I would just say I play some games that are disappointing.
Yeah, yeah. I've played very few bad games. I've played decent games with bad rule books that just made the experience not fun, at least the first
Yeah.
playthrough or so. I don't know that I've played very many bad games.
No, I'm very much of the opinion that most games are good, some games are great, and that's really like guided my review process, and that's been like it's been refreshing because I'm just like, yeah, I like this game. Is it like a game that's going to change the game itself? Like, are people going to be talking about this game in 6 years? No, but that's fine. You can have a
Yeah, yeah,
game for now. Like,
totally.
it's cheaper than a movie.
It's
Sometimes.
true. It's
Ugh.
true.
So you were talking about press your luck and just like mechanically, I'm intrigued. Do you have any like favorite mechanics that you like haven't quite gotten into one of your games or that you'd like to build a game around if you could at some point?
I Push Your Luck is actually one of them. I have a note in my design notebook. This one is wild, and I'm sure people would hate it. But I want a game that is only push your luck. Well, it's I don't even know if it's technically push your luck. I'm gonna say bag building. That's more accurate. I want to do bag building in a game, but I only want the bag to matter at the end. So like you're building a bag with the whole point of like getting the most number of your tokens into that bag as humanly possible. And the victory is actually kind of random because you can not have that many in the bag, and if yours happen to get pulled out, then you can end up the winner. And just it's part of the yeah, it's just one of those weird things that I just really want to try and see if I love it or hate it.
I feel like if you did it like real time, like if it was like, oh, there's like a pile of tokens in the center and we each have bags and we like have 15 seconds to put stuff in the center into the bag and then we pass and then we can put it
Yeah.
again, then we pass, then we put it again, then we pass. And so it's like a question of like, do I want to dilute the stuff with other things that aren't helpful or do I want to put my tokens in so you're more likely to draw my
Oh yeah.
tokens? I think that could actually be really fun if it's short, right? Because then if it's short, you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
It's the investment part, right? You don't want to invest a lot if that's the thing. So it
mhm.
would definitely be like something quick and short and weird.
Oh,
But I like the idea of like the victory could like being determined just by like what comes out of the bag.
mhm. Well, yeah, because you could have it basically where like you pull like five things out of the bag, and then like everyone pulls 5 out of whatever bag they have left, and then whoever has the highest total out of all those bags wins.
Yeah,
I think that would be
basically.
really fun, honestly. Just like something in that space, right? Where it's like you're moving very quickly. Like it's almost like a pirate themed game you could imagine, where like everyone's just kind of like loading up their loot and then they're putting like trying to stuff the ballot for who gets to be the pirate king. And so you're like, well, I want my names to be in there. Like, okay, well, who got like we're pirates, so we'll take 5 votes from each of the bags, and who got the most votes? And you're like, okay, you're the new pirate king.
Yeah, and it could even be the case that like there's some action or some manipulation that happened based on what things get put out. So you can put like weird tokens in there that'd be like, oh, guess what? You got to put 1 back now and take 2 out at the end of the game. So like there's some
Ooh.
weird
Oh yeah, because if you're
goofiness
not
that
if you're
happens
not paying
too.
attention, you grab some like stuff that's like weird effects. That's
Uh-huh.
good. But I may want to throw a weird effect into your bag, but then if you have like a swap token that you draw, I have to change my bag with yours, and now you're like, okay, which thing do I want? I think it could work if it's like frenetic enough.
Yeah, yeah. I'm every once in a while I get one of those ideas of just something that feels totally off the wall and not necessarily uh good game design, and I'm like, let's see if I can make it work.
Oh no, I think I would actually love to play that game. Like just like very fast. I know real time dexterity isn't quite what we're all looking for right now, but if you're
It's
like
true.
if you're like throwing the bag around the table and you've got all these tokens with like different shapes and like some of the good ones are like if they have different shapes, that could be what's really fun. So like all the player tokens are the same shape, but a bunch of the bad tokens are the same shape as well. And so you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, do I want to throw
With
bad stuff into your bag, or do I want to throw in stuff that's like neutral, or like I think it could be, I think it could work
there's something there. And it's in my notebook. I will absolutely touch it at some point. I don't know
at
when,
some
but
point.
I'll get to
I
it.
I think it'll be fun. I'd love to try it once you have a chance to like really refine it out into like a game design.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's the dream, right? All right. Well, speaking of the future, there are a lot of like game designers out there, and I'm not an exhaustive list, not a oh never these other people, but just is there any designer that you would love to collaborate with should you get should the opportunity present itself?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I was thinking about this, and I think, and I think this is because I was on a panel with
Hmm.
Daryl Andrews, and we were talking about play testing,
Hmm.
and some of the things that he described in terms of like how he did playtest or like approach playtest just felt really interesting and different from my process.
Hmm.
So I think because of that, like I would be super interested in that and working with him on something for sure. Um, I would say this is just because of our relationship and how we met. But I would love to do a game with for Tessa Elise too, um, because I think, especially when I first kind of saw Wicked and Wise, her
Hmm.
trick taking game,
Ah, I'm
I was
so
just
excited
like,
for it.
oh my God, for Tessa, like this is a game that like you can make, and I don't even know who else could make it. Like
Hmm.
just talking through it, and like especially those early versions, like I felt so much. It's like, oh, I know exactly where this comes from, and I feel like there's probably some design space that we could get into together and make some pretty incredible things happen. So yeah, that's
That's kind of the
probably top 2 on my list, I think.
That's kind of the dream, though, right? You collaborate with someone who's like who's making games that are completely different than the games that you make, and you make some game that's
Yeah.
like some weird hybrid, and you're like, it's like
Yeah.
it's almost like what Nova Luna, because like Nova Luna is like half patchwork and half habitats, and someone just like
Oh, yeah.
pushed them together, and they're like, now they're one game. And if you had pitched it to me, I'd have been like, what? No.
Right?
And then I tried it and I'm like, oh. I wish the theme weren't this weird moon thing, because I don't get it. But like,
But otherwise,
otherwise, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got on the question side. This was
Whoop,
an
whoop.
absolute blast, though. Thank you so much for taking the time to like hang out, to chat, to answer everything that I wanted to know about. But where can people find you online? Plug projects.
Projects. I'm easy to find. Just if you're looking for me, I'm Akilaverse now on all of the socials. It took me forever to convert them all, but I finally made that happen. So you can find me on Twitch or Twitter, or I think I even have a Facebook page still, and I'm on Instagram as
Nominate.
that. Yeah, Board Game Brothers. So our website, and you can find us at BG Brothers everywhere. Our website is up. We have pre-orders for the Rap Gods and and Hoop Gods games coming out later this year, and we just put up merch. Oh my God! Um,
Merch.
so we have some merch. Probably my favorite is the goat icon. Have you seen the goat icon? I don't
Was it the same as the one in the Hoop Gods?
know.
Okay, because
Well,
I've only seen the one from the preview of Hoop Gods.
yeah, so the preview copy that we sent out, we hadn't finished the art for this yet. But it's great. It's adorable. Ooh, we haven't have pins. I have one here. You probably
Oh,
won't be able to see it, but it's
I
a
mean, I can
tiny,
see it.
tiny goat pin. The pins aren't on there yet. I'm actually thinking the pins might be like a super exclusive thing that we just give out at conventions or like do contests for, because they're adorable. Um, but yeah, I'm excited that we actually got that up and like working, and we have our merch up now, so that's cool. I already mentioned Crit Care, so that's a thing that is we're gonna be going to Kickstarter with that later this year,
Awesome.
also. So more stuff is gonna be coming out sooner. We finally like the game is in like a super super nice spot right now, which it took a little bit to get there, but I'm excited about it. But I do have an event coming up Saturday. The Tabletop Live Network is doing another 24-hour stream. So you can that starts at 12 p.m. Pacific time
Mhm.
on Saturday. This Saturday coming up.
Okay, so this Saturday would be for those of you watching this, because I think this will be posted on the 1st of March. That Saturday would be the. Hold on, I have to actually look at my calendar. That'll be the
Oh,
27th of February. So I think the video will go live after, but I think they should still be able
yes.
to watch it online.
Yeah, so it's everybody's streaming channel. So yeah,
Right.
you could catch up on that if you want. Also, there's another event coming up in March that I'm going to be doing Fancy Friday for the virtual game summit.
Oh yeah.
I'm hosting a fashion event for that, and so that's the second weekend in March.
Well, you're already
Uh,
crushing it now, so like this is a good preview of what people can look forward to, right? Like,
this is actually a good preview. I seriously would put this on. I was like, oh man, now I'm not gonna be able to wear that for the event.
yeah, I had to go back through my videos and I was like, okay, what outfits haven't I worn yet? I can't
Right?
repeat quite yet. And I was like, I haven't worn this berry shirt in years. Sure, why not?
Yeah. That is a fantastic shirt also. Like
Thank you. I
color
actually really like this
wise,
color. Yeah.
it's smoking. Like, yeah, keep wearing it, but not every show in a row. That will be
No, I
weird.
can't. Yeah, well, the problem was I really needed to change the shows so people were aware of the fact that I like laundered my clothes. You know what I mean? Because like, I feel like,
That's true.
especially because I did the first ones, like I did like 5 in like a week, and I was like, okay, I actually have to wear different clothes because they're going to show up on like different points in time. People are like, did he wear the same suit for a month? And I'm like,
No, no, I
no.
didn't. I didn't do that. No, I think about it all the time for my Twitch. I'm like, did I wear this shirt before?
I have 3 of the same black T-shirt, and so like that becomes a problem, right? Because if it's one
Yeah.
week I'm not paying attention, I suddenly have like worn this shirt for a while. I've like worn what looks like this shirt for a while. People are like, I'm like, sorry, this is the same shirt
Do
as
you wash, Eric?
yesterday, and they're like, "That's gross." I was, no, sorry. I mean, it's the holds up other shirt. These two shirts are the same shirt.
Yeah. I just wore them 2 days in a row, which is normal and not strange, and I do
Uh,
wash clothes.
the pandemic makes it so hard to track time, so it's hard to track like what clothes I'm wearing when.
Mm.
Ugh,
No, I don't know the days. I don't know the time. It is a very strange time to be alive.
that is true. Huh. Well, speaking of time, though, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It was a blast having
Yeah.
you, and looking forward to both when we can like hang out virtually and when we can actually like hang out in person again.
I can't wait for either of those,
It's
honestly.
gonna happen.
I'm
But
ready.
yeah, take care and thanks for chatting.
No, this was great, Eric. I hope you continue doing this show because it's amazing.
Thank you. I'm having a blast doing it. So yeah, thanks again.
Awesome. See you.
Well, that's all the time we have for you today. But thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Late Night Table Talk.